In today's Destiny Friday, I'm asking the question, should the ARH team go back and reevaluate their product release model and cadence? A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, my Star Wars Destiny friends. Welcome back to Dice Commando and the Commando cast, and thanks so much for checking in here yet again on your Destiny Friday, or your Saturday or Sunday, or whatever it may be for you. But either way, cheers, first off. So yes, it's been a long week for me, and it's also like super hot here, like unseasonably hot for this, how early it is, global warming and all that, right? But no, I'm decided it'd be fun to have this culture chat, do a beer chat with it. I'm drinking Hoppa Don't Preach by my favorite brewery, because I love IPAs and I love dad jokes, and Hoppa Don't Preach, well, it's just sung to me. So anyway, let's get into today's discussion. So this actually was inspired by kind of an after. So we had Casero on last week for kind of a state of the World Cup update after their round 2 for the most part. It was really cool. Again, if you haven't watched it, go back. It's a really good like meta check-in status and how people are trying to play each other. And it's good times, right? And he's obviously a great leader in the community and always a good interview. But after, as we were shutting down, we were kind of having a chat and talking, you know, the huge spike of interest we saw from this event, and also when we saw the new product release, and by the new product, I mean ARH 8, right? We all know it's not a product in the traditional sense because they're not selling it. But in terms of like the release and stuff, I'm going to be referring it to as a product. That's just how I think about it. I know they're not technically selling anything, be very clear there, right? But that's just how I think about it. So if you don't like that term, that's cool, but you can use whatever floats your boat, right? But we were talking about how when ARH dropped, we pulled all these people back, which makes complete sense. Now, something that I'd been thinking about before, and then he mentioned as well, and we had a good conversation about it in the moment, is it time for a revisit to the current model of these large, 100-ish card expansions every, I think it was 8 months before, it's probably a little, but either way, a couple times a year. That's the current model, right? A couple times a year, you get this big influx of cards. And the reason they've done it that way is because, historically, the reason they've done it that way is because that's the way it is in TCGs, right? You get, in TCGs, right? Or TCGs, CCGs, trading card games, collectible card games, whatever you want to call it. That's how they drop this stuff. Now, there's a reason that they do it this way, which is, it used to be like right around 150 cards, like in the FFG days. It's like 150 cards. Their target was every couple times a year, but that's why the game died. They couldn't hit it. But all that aside, there's a reason that the industry does this, and it's because in these collectible models, they want to be able to do rarity and stuff like that, right? You flip that over to, LCGs or XCGs, which is living card games or expandable card games or whatever, again, label you want to put on it. But they'll instead do a model where instead of these large expansions a couple times a year, they might throw you 5 or 6 expansions that are like 25, 30 cards, right? Or they'll introduce a new hero and a complete deck for that hero. Or they will introduce a subset of like an injection for a faction or whatever it may be, right? So those are the two different models. And it works, again, if you're not chasing like the Uber cards, you don't want people to open a bunch of stuff like in the TCG model. The reason they do that, they want people to open a bunch of product to chase, the legendaries, like as it would have applied in the past to Star Wars Destiny. But given the fact now, it's a reasonable question, right? Since ARH, 8 expansions in, by the way, right? ARH 8 dropped, right? They're working on ARH 9 right now. Probably they have scope for ARH 10, right? They've copied that model because that's the way it was. But given the way that they're releasing cards, does that make sense? So that's what I want to talk about today. So we've talked about the model we have today, why we have it. And then, it's no secret that when we get new stuff, whether it be a new Smash release, whether it be new draft kit, right, Dicey Companions, or whether we get actual legitimate ARH stuff, the level of excitement is crazy. People want to go craft. They want to have fun. They want to try the new stuff. So there's an inherent barrier there with think about what ARH has to do, the ARH team has to do to get one of these huge expansions out. They have to develop all of it. They have to test all of it, not only within itself, but within the existing pool. Then they have to do all the art, and it just takes a massive amount of time. Now you flip that back around. What if they only were doing 20 cards? What if they were only dropping, a base turret? Or what if they were only, that's why I have these folks up, right? If they were just going to drop a Dinbo, and they'd give you that and maybe 5, 6, 10 cards with which to support that within the existing structure. They could turn that around significantly faster, right? So you could do that, you could have a Dinbo and a base turret and Balin and whatever, Balin Shin, right? You get my point, right? You could drop this stuff more frequently. Now, that reduces the time between. So does it make it, it's a fair question, does it make it as exciting? I honestly don't know. What would somebody be like, oh, well, because they're releasing something, let's say every 6 weeks, every 6 weeks they release a new pack of 10, 15 cards with a new theme. Do you say, oh, well, I don't care about that theme, let's take it off? So then you don't have these ups and downs, right? Because again, in a game like Star Wars Destiny, where you have, less overall people, giving everyone a reason to pull together is valid, or is a valid concept. And it's like, the reason it was awesome because everyone came back together and tried the new stuff, because there was so much new stuff to try. That is a valued argument on the one side. Of course, on the other side is if you kept giving people constant stuff, they would just, I don't mean swim like a fish, right? But what I'm saying is instead of seeing these spikes and stuff like this I'm doing with my hand, you'd see more of like a leveling, I think. And yes, maybe not everyone's interested in, ARH 9.4, but you'd be overall ARH 9 would maintain a more consistent, longer tail of excitement. So that's something to think about. And then, obviously the effort of, what if you send it over to whomever doing that? I think Echo's still doing all the art these days, right? But you still have Sarah Evans, at least to my knowledge, is involved in the promo cards and stuff like that, right? You send them off a job of 9 to 12 cards that they have to do, as opposed to looking at this huge pile of 150, 120 cards, 110 cards, whatever. It's significantly different. They'll think, what, I can crank out, I'm going to take Thursday and I'm going to crank out these 10 cards, as opposed to saying, oh my God, I guess I'm going to do this over the next quarter, right? And then it gets binned and fall, right? I mean, that's just human nature, with the fact that people that are doing this aren't paid to do it, right? And they have other things to do. So I think from a real life standpoint, not just from an excitement standpoint, not just from a more frequency standpoint, I think it also might actually be easier on the existing ARH team structure. Okay. Now, what I want to do is kind of, if we're going to, let's call them pods, right? They'll release pods of, again, Dinbo, base turret, whatever, right? They'll release these little pods. What are the drawbacks of moving away from that? I mean, I already spoke to one of, if you always have just a constant thing, it becomes, each individual release itself becomes less exciting. That is a true statement, right? And human nature is, it's like, oh my God, this great thing, let's go back. We'll play the release. But what if they had a release tournament every, what if they had a release tournament every 6-8 weeks because it was a new thing to go try out? Now, sure, I guess you run the risk of like having 40 people playing Dinbo or something like that. But, if you really compare that to, again, Flesh and Blood, right? When Flesh and Blood does a new release, they send the new packs out and everybody just casually plays it, right? It's about learning the new cards and having fun with it. And it's a very successful model that they've moved into now. And I don't see why it would have to be any different for the Dinbo pod or whatever, right? It's like, oh, let's get together, try the new cards. Let's see how Dinbo pairs with this, right? And then see, obviously you're going to, so say you release Din and Bo together. Well, it doesn't mean everyone's going to sit down and play Dinbo, right? Somebody's going to be like, oh, well, I'll play Din in this. I'll play Bo in this. And then you go from there, but obviously with the center of the new release, and then the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. I think it's kind of cool concept. But again, I do, acknowledge that you're leveling off the excitement peaks, which might make it appear to be less exciting. But I think, I guess let me know, what do you think? Do you think having the more frequent releases would help retention, Or do you think that pulling everybody in a game like Destiny, in a culture like Destiny right now, ARH Destiny like we have right now, is it important to have those bigger spikes to pull more people in, even if only temporarily? I guess maybe that's the overall question, is not should they change the model. I think the model would be easier and more successful for them as a team. But would it be more successful in the end goal, the overall arching goal of Destiny that we're all here for, which is to keep the game going, right? So retention, I don't necessarily know that it's going to be attraction, although I will say that, part of the reason that they did the 2-player set and stuff, at least the concept of the 2-player set, why do you do stuff like that? To make it easier for folks to get something to latch onto. Well, if you're releasing a Dinbo deck, releasing a base turret deck every 6-8 weeks, or even once a quarter, whatever it may be, right? Once a quarter, you have this new cool thing. It's like, oh, you know what? I want to play that. I'll play it, and if I don't like it, I don't like it, but why not come try it? It seems very portable, especially over from, especially with the large number of folks that we have over in Star Wars Unlimited and stuff. It seems very portable to pull them over and have them play a new starter deck that just released. So I think it's a positive and a negative there that could go either way. Certainly could, but I think it's very valid. So the other huge impact, so if a change like, I'm not saying my change, but if a change like this were to happen, right? Because you get the general, like whether it be 6-8 weeks, 30 cards, 10 cards, whatever, right? They'll have to figure out how they want to do it and what's manageable. The other drawback of that is it does admittedly become harder it becomes easier to test and balance that release it becomes easier to test and balance any individual release within the grand scheme of the game. But within the grand scheme of their plan of where they want the game to go, it becomes much harder to control where it goes. I mean, this is a very crude analogy, but it's a lot easier to draw a straight line between two, well, maybe not a straight line, but it's easier to get from point A to point B drawing one line, as opposed to if you were to say, I can see point A and see point B and draw a line between them, I guess is that's a good one. I can see point A and I can see point B, and I'll draw a line between them. It's a lot easier to draw that line than to say, okay, here's point A, point B is somewhere over there. So you draw a line. You're like, all right, well, now point B is somewhere over here, right? And you end up getting this jagged line, and it might not look anything like, maybe that's a horrible analogy, but what I'm trying to draw here is like over the long course of where they want the game to go, I think your design probably becomes more reactionary than it does progressive. And I do think that's a risk. Do you move into kind of more of a silver bullet strategy of, we released this pod that was just too good, so in this next one, we'll release this one card that kind of takes it down a notch. Well, now we need to release another silver bullet, and so on and so on. That's certainly a design risk that people fall into, because we have to admit there's a little bit of, we often do, and this is all of us, right? There's often a little bit of design hubris, right? Of, well, I can make this thing super powerful because I can control it. Right? I'll make this thing super powerful so I can control it, and then you miss something and it's busted, right? So then you release a silver bullet to fix it instead of just correcting it or whatever. It's a risk, is all I'm going to say, because think about it. If you're only releasing something every 6 to 8 weeks, you would likely wait until the next release to do an errata, to do a balance, to do a ban, whatever it might be. You're going to wait. I mean, it just tactically makes sense. Let the meta play out. Don't react. Let the meta play out. And then do it then, but then you're already behind the 8 ball because you don't know how that change integrates with the new stuff because you didn't test it that way. You see what I'm saying? Whereas, on a long-term thing, they can control it with this huge influx that's balanced, and you have more wiggle room. So that's a drawback as well. And then the ultimate thing is, within ARH culture, we'd really have to reconceptualize what rotation means. And they're already doing that to a certain extent, right? With the ARH, we have the Echoes of Destiny, and then you have the ARH Echoes of Destiny, which is completely the right thing to do, right? And how do the pods then? But you have, again, this 3-set rotation, right? And it's not 3. It's first in, first out now. My apologies. But you have first in, first out, where you have, some subset of legal sets, and then you have the reprint sets. But now you're dropping pods in. do they go to like a card maximum? Probably they do. Probably they do. And then, on top of that, it becomes a little harder. And I don't know that this is necessarily needed, right? But traditionally, we've released roughly an equal number of heroes for each color and each faction, right? So traditionally you get 3 heroes and a non-unique of each color. I mean, by and large, that's what we see, right? So if you're releasing these pods, you get away from that. So then do you get forced into things to balance stuff? Maybe, maybe not. That could go anyway. And also, do you then see potentially, because you're releasing these pods, you want them to be somewhat thematic, do you run the risk of having less overall uniques? Sorry, non-uniques, right? Because your minions are going to be less likely to make it in that deck, is what I'm saying. So there's a drawback there as well. But something you could do then, and again, I'm just spitballing here, but something you could do is kind of like a old school, like early 2000s Magic the Gathering type thing, where they release a core set and then a bunch of small sets after that support the core set. And then you could rotate. And then what they would do essentially is they called it a block. And they would release, like, let's say a course, they'd release like a 300 card set and then 2 like 100-ish card sets after that. But the whole block would rotate together because they'd all be in the same theme. Now, I'm not saying that they do a 300, a 150, and a 150, but you see my point, right? They could do like a 50 or 60 card set and then like 3 or 4 pods after that, all tied together, and then they just rotate out together. Actually, I think that's probably the right answer. I think that's probably the right answer for them. And the thing is, they don't even need to do it all at the same time, but it also lets them do their theme thing. Oh my God, I love this idea, right? Because, you look at something like Charm, right? We've well established that it takes roughly about 3 sets to kind of run the arc of a design, right? You have the bulk support of it in 1, you kind of round out what you missed in 2, and then you kind of expand on it in 3, right? So they could do that. They could be like, all right, here's the Charm set. We're going to release 4 or 5, the Han Chewie expansion that's a good great example, right? The Han Chewie Charm, the Garsa Whip 3-wide Charm, something like that, over the course of that set. Oh, that's a good idea. I like that. So you do like a core set and then a couple supporting pods. That was not my plan coming into this video. But hey, I don't know what that means. I was going to say hop, but don't preach. I don't know what that means in this context. Either way, I like the idea. So, and we've done very little damage as per normal. So first one of the night too, tell you what. So anyway, I think that'll do it today. I'd love to hear your chat or hear your thoughts below. I came out of this in a different spot than I thought we were going to go into, but I think it's a good chat, right? I think it was good to kind of think through that, even if only to myself and a computer screen. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you hate the idea, that's fair too. I don't know that there is a right answer, but I would what we do need to do, and I think we can all agree on, is we can't have another huge gap like we had for ARH 8, right? And I think that what made that large gap is completely reasonable in terms of the demand on the ARH team and where we're at currently in the life cycle of Destiny. So instead of trying to hit the same rock over and over again, maybe we don't, right? Maybe we just try something else. I think it's a very good idea. Not my idea per se, but I think it's a good idea to try something else. So anyway, that's roughly 20 minutes of me preaching. See what I... Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining, folks. Let me know what your thoughts are. Seriously, love to hear comments below. Go Commando.